I'm Paul Levinson, and welcome to Light On, Light Through, episode 366, my review of Maestro, the biopic about Leonard Bernstein. I think of this movie as the memorable and the missing. So let me start with what I really liked about Maestro. It went up just a few days ago on Netflix after opening in theaters in November, and I thought Bradley Cooper's performance as Bernstein was tour de force, an incandescent, stunning rendition of how music inhabited, animated, catapulted the composer, and even more so the conductor. I've never seen anything quite like it on the screen, and memorable is really too weak a word to describe it. Now, I thought Carey Mulligan, who played Bernstein's wife, gave an excellent performance, but it was just not way out there in the stratosphere, really extraordinary, as was Bradley Cooper's as Bernstein. But here's what I thought was missing. There was no mention of Bernstein's 1967 CBS special, Inside Pop, The Rock Revolution. That TV program was a breakthrough in television and in popular cultural history. Now, the Beatles didn't need Bernstein to tell us how great and original they were. Everyone with ears worth having back then already knew that. Same for Bob Dylan, the Beach Boys, the Rolling Stones, the Byrds, the Left Bank, and Janis Ian, and other recording artists Bernstein featured on that program. We already knew them too. And if we had any knowledge and appreciation of classical music, we already had come to the conclusion that this kind of rock and roll music and folk music, in some ways, exceeded classical music as pathways to our hearts and souls. And it would continue to do so into the future. But Bernstein's CBS special was a welcome and crucially important signal anyway. I remember when I saw it on television on CBS, I already, of course, loved, for example, John Lennon's She Said, She Said, and, the changes in time tempo, but it was so enlightening and even exciting to hear Bernstein explain how the rhythm in that song went from 4/4 to 3/4. When I was a boy band, dan, 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 dan. It was really an extraordinary thing to do in a pop record. And Bernstein did that for all of the artists that he described and played in that CBS special. It broadcast a statement that still feels fresh today after all these years. Music does not need to be orchestral and written in the past to be eternal. And yet, there was no mention of that CBS special at all in the movie, which was all the more surprising to me, given that David Oppenheim prominently featured in Maestro as one of Bernstein's male lovers, co-wrote Inside Pop with Bernstein and was its producer. And that's not all. Now, West Side Story is recognized as one of the greatest musicals of the 20th century. That one musical, because of its lyrics as well as its music, probably has had more impact on the world than most of Roger and Hammerstein's wonderful musicals put together. You do hear some of the instrumental riffs from West Side Story in the background at one point in Maestro, And the famous interview with Bernstein and his wife Felicia on Edward R. Murrow's Person to Person is portrayed in the movie, with a brief mention of West Side Story and Stephen Sondheim. By the way, Sondheim was not mentioned, nor was the name of the musical in the actual 1955 interview, and I'll have a link to that interview. It's up on YouTube, so I'll have a link to that interview in the show notes to this episode of Light On, Light Through. But other than that very brief mention, that's it for Sondheim in Maestro. No short scene of him writing the lyrics or discussing the words put to music in West Side Story with Bernstein. Sondheim is thanked by the producers of Maestro in the credits, but has nearly zero presence in the movie. Why was that? By the way, the movie is somewhat controversial in its depiction of Bernstein's bisexuality. He's depicted as genuinely loving his wife, passionately kissing her as he rushes off stage after his tempestuous conducting, and siring their children. But he also flirts with men all the time, seductively massages David Oppenheim's foot, and is seen in bed with a male lover at the beginning of the movie. Other than the fact that he had children, who knows if all of those interactions were an accurate portrayal of Bernstein's sexuality, if he was equally at home with either gender in bed, and if not, which one had greater carnal appeal. So I'll confine myself to saying the whole gamut was very well acted in the movie. And I'll hope to someday see another biopic of Leonard Bernstein that explores and presents a fuller tableau of this genius's extraordinary contribution to the world.
The Light on Light Through podcast.
And I hope you enjoyed that review of Maestro. I will be back here next week, next Tuesday afternoon, with another episode of Light On, Light Through. It'll probably be another review of, I think, another worthwhile program. You know, I rarely, if ever, review shows, whether they're films or television series, that I don't like. I really don't have the time for that. So usually you'll hear me explain why I at least really loved some part of what I'm reviewing. So I hope to see you back here next week. In the meantime, stay safe, stay sound, and keep doing whatever you can to help the people of Israel and Ukraine fight off the terrorists and fascists that have attacked and are attacking their countries.
The Light on Light Through podcast.
Athens, 2042 AD. She ripped the paper in half, then ripped the halves, then ripped what was left again into bits and pieces of history that could have been. Sierra Waters had read once that, years ago, it was thought that men made love for the thrill, while women made love for the sense of connection it gave them.
Curled Up with a Good Book says, Sierra Waters is sexy as hell. You can find out more about The Plot to Save Socrates by Paul Levinson at theplottosavesocrates.com.
Paul Levinson spilt codes about an ancient biotech war raging on in secret for centuries.